Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
Using a 10mm wrench, disconnect the negative battery terminal and wait 3 minutes. You need to remove this little door on the bottom of the steering wheel. There's a flat-bladed screwdriver. Pop it open. Pull it out. The yellow connector in here. Pull that out of there. A black lock on it. It's this here. Just slide it up to unlock it. At the same time, you pull it apart. So now the airbag is disconnected. Now we need to unbolt it. There's a T30 Torx inside this hole. It's a bolt. There's one on each side. Should have new ones on hand before you remove these. Okay, I have to feel for it. There. We do the same for the other side. Just kind of find it. There's the bolts. All right, so with that removed, those bolts removed, this airbag should come out. You have to unplug the horn connection, just down here. I should have done that before I pulled it all the way out. It says, it's kind of hard to see, it says push right here. Push in on that lock, and that should pull right out. So the yellow is your airbag power. This is your horn. And that's your airbag. I'm going to remove this lower dashboard trim. It just clips into place. You can reach your hand behind it and just kind of gently pull out. It will unclip. Some clips on the top. These clips here just unclips. We'll put that aside in the back seat. To get these plastics off that are around the steering column, I'm going to pull the lock down, lower it, and I'll lock it in place. I'm probably gonna have to move the handle at some point. I'm gonna take my Phillips head screwdriver. There's 3 Phillips head screws, one in each of these openings. This one's the easiest to see. Start with this one. Put that aside. Feel for the screw up here. This one doesn't want to come out. It's got a pretty big washer on it. If I looked inside, when I look inside there. So it's kind of stuck in the plastic. It should fall out when I take this apart. We'll just watch for it. So I'm going to remove this one too. Whoop. So I just kind of wiggled it a little bit and both screws fell out. This should separate now. You need to remove the plastics from the steering column. You may need to take the plastic trim tool and separate them. Just kind of slide the tool in between the two halves. Helps pop it apart. The top one will come right out. And the bottom one, probably have to fish it around the lever. Just take this out, put it aside. Before you remove the steering wheel, make sure it's turned so that it's aligned in the center and that the wheels of the car are pointing straight ahead. You're going to loosen the 14mm bolt that's holding the steering wheel on. Use a 14mm socket, ratchet extension. So it usually breaks free. If it locks the wheel, that's okay. You just put the key back in and unlock it. Now, if you take this all the way out and you try to pull the steering wheel off, it's not going to want to come off. And if you're trying to pull on it like this, it might break free and hit yourself in the face, and then you'll hurt yourself. Also, you shouldn't be hitting on the steering column or anything to try to remove this. You're going to need a puller tool. Get the appropriate size bolts to go into these two threaded openings. You don't want to thread them in too far. So I need to reset this. I think I'm going to use it without the point. So just thread these bolts in just by hand until they stop. You don't want to go too far because you'll hit the clock spring and damage it. So just like a few turns in, make it tight like that. Then we'll spin this out. It will meet the head of the bolt. Make sure this has enough loose threads so that the steering wheel can actually move. With our puller on there, use the appropriately sized socket for it. This one is a 3/4 inch. We're going to tighten it in. That broke our steering wheel free. Sometimes these take a lot of force and it'll snap, but if you've got the bolt in there, it shouldn't pop off. So you take these puller bolts out. Put this all aside, you're done with it. Pull this bolt out. Before we get too far, there's an electrical connection here. I'm going to want to unplug that. It's kind of hard to get my finger in here to unlock it, so I'm going to push it with the plastic trim tool, and then I can pull this out. Just like that. Do the bolt. Steering wheel will come off the splines, and we'll feed the wire through the opening, and there's our steering wheel. There are two electrical connectors to the clock spring. This top one here, the white connector. We're going to undo that one first. You need to follow this wire sheeting down. There's a yellow connector. That means it's for the airbag. It's popped into this push clip. I want to unlock the push clip that's holding on the yellow connector for the airbag. So I don't want to break this, I want to reuse it. So I'm going to use these little needle-nose pliers. See if I can move this down more. It's down as far out as it will go. I'm going to reach up in here and squeeze the two tabs together. And try to pull this out just like that. You can reuse that clip and lift that up. So this black lock is spring loaded. Push it down to unlock it. Pull that right out. You can slide this underneath here. There's a little pull tab on the bottom, so I'm using a right angle pick, or you can use a small flat bladed screwdriver. I'm just going to gently pry this down. I don't want to break it. And we're going to pop that off. And then the top part has a similar style clip, but it's hidden. You can't see it, so I'm going to gently lift it up. Pop it right off. It's a very similar style clip. It's just hard to see. It would be hard to get to. it's easier to start with the bottom one. And there's our clock spring. If you had a new clock spring where we're using the old one, it would come with this seal piece locked here in the correct position. If you needed to reset it, for some reason you moved it, you can turn it clockwise till it stops, and then turn it back 3 turns. So 1, 2, 3, and then it's about 3 turns because you want that arrow to be pointing to the top, and then these will be basically right in the middle, and then also this would line up there. You can line this up, you can feed this wire through. Before you clip this on, just make sure that your turn signal cancel, that's what this yellow piece is. These 2 things should be nice and straight up and down at 12 and 6 o'clock. Basically line them up with that tab there. So let me just put this aside here for a second. So what this does is when you say you want to take a left turn, you put your turn signal down, this little white arm pops out, and as you make your turn, see it comes out, and then you keep turning, then you've made your turn and you come back, and it cancels the switch and turns your turn signal off. And that works the same way for both sides, obviously. Now let's put this on, that nice and lined up like that. Might have to catch the bottom one first and then the top one. So that's installed. Now we'll plug this white connector in. It'll snap when it's locked into place. We'll reinstall, we'll reconnect this yellow connector. That'll click when it locks into place, and then push it back into the little mounting tab here. That's all set. When you reinstall the steering wheel does have splines in it, as does the steering column. So make sure that you line it up nice in the middle. You don't put it crooked because then your wheels will be off. Make sure it stays right where it needs to be. Also going to feed this wire up and through the opening. There are 2 yellowish orange dowels that are going to line up with the 2 openings here. And there's also a bit of an alignment mark right here in the plastic trim that kind of lines up the opening between these 2 arrows. So that looks nice and straight. I can plug this connector in right now. Just be careful when you're putting this in. I clipped this connector in. This wire got pushed up here. I actually want it to run down underneath. So I'm going to remove this connector or disconnect it and fish this wire for the airbag underneath. That's better. That's the way I want it run. Now I can plug this in, clip those back in. It's nice and lined up. This is going to go through here and underneath for now. Take our steering wheel bolt, install it. I've got the torque wrench set to 29 foot-pounds. I have to use the extension to get it in here. I'm going to hold the steering wheel and just torque this. And when it clicks, the torque is set. Start the top trim, slide it in here, and I can slide this. It should sit just on top like that. Take the lower cover, you might have to fool with the lever, maneuver it up in here. And we'll clip that down, lock it, doesn't move on me. Lift it up. With those clipped in, reinstall the screws. Steering column has 3 screws. These 2 go into the plastic. This is the small machine screw. It's going to go down here in the bottom. I have to move this around a bit. Thread this in. And just tighten it up. You don't have to kill it. Just enough. And then of course, reinstall these. And the same for the other one. And not too tight, they're just going into plastic. Reinstall the airbag. We're gonna plug in, I'll lay it here. A little tricky to do it with only 2 hands. So this is the horn, plug this in. We'll click into place. And this one here, the yellow one, actually powers the airbag. Of course, make sure the battery is still disconnected. You should have disconnected it before getting this far. Plug it back in. It'll lock into place. So plugged in. These need to be clipped underneath. So I'm going to pull the wires down, put them down there, and then slide this up into place. It'll sit there. Take the Torx bolts. Without the ratchet attached, I'm just going to use the extension in the socket. Go right in the opening here. Do this for both sides. We'll do the same for this side. You might have to push in on the airbag a little bit to get it to line up. Get that threaded in. Tighten it up. I've turned the steering wheel so you can see what we're doing better. You don't have to do this part, it's just so you can see it. So this yellow connector is going to push up into place here. It's going to lock. And then the little white connector will sit right here. And we'll take the cover. It has 2 tabs that line up with 2 openings here. And these 2 locking tabs. Slide that into place. And push it right in. And the airbag is reinstalled. Now I can reconnect the negative. This one happens to use a 10mm. Tighten that up. We'll turn our key on, the ignition. We're looking for the SRS lights to go out. They do their self-check. They've gone out. So you don't even have to start the car, but you can just kind of turn the wheel back and forth. So the light's not coming on. So that means that our airbag and clock spring are all set and they're working properly.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.